I have a lot of thoughts on Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, so sit tight, shut it and buckle up because it is one hell of a bumpy ride. In the first half of this review, I will avoid spoilers, and then I will clearly indicate when the spoilers are coming in the second half, so don't be alarmed. This film was announced 3 years ago, but I have been waiting to see these characters together on the big screen for even longer than that. My excitement levels had not been this high since, well, it was probably Star Wars, which was only in December, but you get my point. I was hyped. I am a long-time Bat fan, so I was very hopeful for this movie. However, this isn't the movie I had hoped and dreamed of. This was a poorly paced, messy movie. It wasn't awful, but it did not live up to my expectations. However, I'll explain what I liked and what I disliked. I think the opening was great. The scenes from Man of Steel, but from a normal human's perspective, were harrowing. We saw a snippet of that in the trailer, but the full sequence in this movie was very effective. Straight away, I understood Bruce Wayne's views on this godlike alien. Someone who is able to cause that much destruction should be made to answer for their actions. I really like this older, more experienced Batman. Ben Affleck has potentially given us the best portrayal of the Dark Knight yet. He was very intense, extremely intimidating, and pretty damn scary. As I mentioned, I loved his views on Superman. I don't necessarily agree with all those views, but his need to be prepared for the worst case scenario is absolute Batman. However, he still wasn't perfect. I'm willing to assume that the death of Robin sort of drove him over the edge, making him far more brutal than he had previously been. At no point was it stated that the death of his partner is the reason for his brutality, but I think the characterization for Batman could have been helped by this. All I would ask for would be a quick discussion or an argument between Bruce and Alfred. Also, he uses a gun. When he was disarming the thugs in the warehouse, he uses one of their weapons on another one of them. It was ever so brief, but it bugged me a bit. Batman hates guns. His parents were killed with one, and now he despises them. That's basic Batman lore. As is not killing. Don't get me started on the whole not killing thing. Come on, Batman's not supposed to murder people, and yet that's pretty much all he did in this film. It was ridiculous. If Batman is so okay with killing, then we all know who would be at the top of his list. It's the Joker, right? Especially when he's killed Robin. He's a psychotic clown. The reason that the dynamic between Batman and the Joker is so interesting is because Batman refuses to cross that line of killing, no matter how much he is tempted. That's why the Joker always comes back. But in this world, Batman will burn a random thug to death. Why would he allow the Joker, who's capable of so much more chaos and destruction, to go on living? It doesn't make sense. I do hope that this over-the-top brutality is acknowledged and resolved in a future film. I'm all for dark stories, but Superman isn't a dark character. He should have been a ray of hope and justice, but instead he was almost as grim as Batman. Now, to be fair, he had legitimate reasons for being grim throughout the film, but I just wanted to see him happily save some people. A montage of heroic acts would have been good. A montage of heroic acts during the daytime would have been even better, but perhaps that would have been asking too much of Zack Snyder. I think Henry Cavill is great. I love him in this role, but I just want Superman to be more, well, super. Actual actor Henry Cavill in interviews seems like a nicer, friendlier, and all-round more pleasant guy than the Superman of these movies. I think Wonder Woman was fantastic. The rock music that accompanied her was badass. It was also cool to see Chris Pine cameo in an old photograph. That was a sneaky bit of setup for Wonder Woman's solo movie, which will largely take place in the past. When she was taking part in the battle, she was a force to be reckoned with. She was fierce, and she wielded her sword and shield like a pro. It definitely made me excited for her adventure next year. Thank goodness they didn't screw her up. If they did, it would have been a huge misstep in any attempt to bring equality to superhero films. When you think of female superheroes, you think of Wonder Woman. This film, fortunately, does not do anything to tarnish her reputation. In fact, one of my favourite shots in the whole movie is when she first leaps at Doomsday in the final battle. I think the only aspect of the movie that I'm still undecided on is Lex Luthor. I don't know how to feel about Jesse Eisenberg's portrayal. I believe his evil plan is brilliant, but I think the man behind the plan is rather annoying. His whole plan was kind of dark and terrifying, and that's classic Luthor. But this is not the classic evil businessman. This is more of a mad scientist version. If he had been cast as the Riddler, he would have been perfect. Although I may have mixed feelings, his scene with Superman, near to the final battle, was awesome. We had been promised cameos of The Flash, Aquaman and Cyborg, and we got them. However, the method of which we first met them was another example of poor writing. These characters deserved a better introduction to this universe. I'm pretty certain that I could have written them into the film in a better way myself. It was still exciting to see them, but you'll understand what I mean if you've actually seen the movie. For a movie called Batman v Superman, they didn't actually fight that much. It took them about 2 hours to get to the fighting each other, and then they didn't even do it for that long. Now, when they were fighting, I did like that. I thought it was pretty cool, and it was just like the comics. Superman seemed to be holding back a little bit, and Batman had had a lot of time to prepare, so it was a classic Batman v Superman fight. Because yes, they do it all the time in the comics. It usually sells issues, and so I guess they decided it would also sell tickets. But as I said, it took too long to get to that, and getting up to that, there were a lot of times where it was just kind of boring. For a 2.5-hour movie, they could have cut out at least half an hour of it, and considering that they cram-packed it with so much stuff, I really shouldn't be feeling like that. Overall, I thought the film was just okay. It felt very rushed, like they were just playing catch-up with Marvel. Without going into spoilers, I believe the whole final act should have been saved for the next movie. I don't think it truly deserved the ending it got. The Dark Knight is up there for me as one of the greatest superhero movies ever. For me, it is perhaps just below The Avengers. Those are both very different movies, but I love both of them. Really, this movie should have been a mixture of both of those movies. My excitement, joy, and all the good feelings I had whilst watching The Avengers is something I desperately wanted to be matched in this movie. However, that wasn't the case. Assembling The Avengers was so much more fun than this. Okay, now I'm going to spoil some things, so if you haven't seen the movie, come back to this part when you have. You have been warned. I mentioned earlier that the film didn't deserve its ending. What I meant by that is that I think it's far too early for a Death of Superman adaptation. I didn't like how rushed it felt. The public's opinion of him is mixed, and that's because of the destruction of Metropolis in Man of Steel. The destruction was just as bad in this movie, so I don't really see why the public would suddenly adore and mourn him. In this film, they should have had him save the day with very little destruction and very little casualties, and then have him sacrifice himself at the end of a Justice League movie. If he had learned his lesson from Man of Steel, he would have brought the fight elsewhere. Now, he does attempt to bring it into space, but I needed a successful relocation of the battle. If the trio successfully handled the threat without any destruction or civilian casualties, then the general public would have fallen in love with them. There would be no more Superman debate. If he goes on to lead the Justice League, then their combined abilities would potentially cause the world's crime rate to drop to the lowest in recorded history. Now that's a reason to love Superman. This would make up for all the initial destruction in Man of Steel. He would have learnt his lesson, and all the good he would be doing would allow the public to forgive him. Then, boom, kill him. Now we have a character that both the audience and the people of this cinematic universe feel for. That path would lead to a much more touching death scene. Not only would we mourn for him, but his fellow Justice Leaguers would too. Speaking of fellow Justice Leaguers, we got a time-travelling Flash. That initial cameo was very exciting. Didn't see that coming at all. Now, I'm not sold on the costume or the actor, but it was pretty difficult to see. So let's give it the benefit of the doubt. It didn't look as aerodynamic as one might expect for a speedster, but it's fair enough because they're probably still tweaking the design anyway. We won't see the Flash until the Justice League movie, so they have time to sort it out. His warning seemed to be setting up an Injustice-style story, which would be awesome. If you haven't read that story or played that video game, then I highly recommend checking it out. So as I said, overall, this film was just okay. But with that flashback and with other things that happen throughout the movie, it does make me excited for the future of these movies. So it may not be the best place to start off, but let's get excited for the next ones. Because I am a big DC fan, and I'm very excited for a solo Batman movie. Hopefully Civil War can be the movie that I sort of wanted this one to be. Better luck next time, DC. Hopefully Suicide Squad's gonna kick ass. It certainly looks good.